Now, tomorrow's State of the Nation address will be the last before elections. This could influence what the president may choose to focus on during his speech. Let's discuss this particularly with political analyst Prof. Dirk Kotze. Prof, good to have you. Thank you very much for coming on. And it is, we hate to say it, but we always say it's a watershed moment for South Africa as democracy. It's the 30th anniversary of the South African constitutional democracy. It's the last State of the Nation address for this 6th administration. We don't know what it will look like in the next administration. Others saying it will be mostly coalitions at national level. We don't know what would that look like. But the president would want to demonstrate success. He will want to make some bold commitments as well. Are there any milestones he can reflect on?
Well, as you say, he's going to look at the ANC of the past 30 years, obviously the past 5 years, but I think he's going to look further back to the whole period since 1994, and that he will then make numerous claims of whether it is about the provision of housing, whether it's electrification of townships and of families' homes, whether it is about infrastructural development, whether it is about the new direction in which now the energy is going, the type of early successes that they can claim, anything really, because the ANC is with the back against the wall. And I think therefore this SONA's address is going to be also very much used in order to demonstrate to the public, or what they would like to do, to demonstrate to the public the successes as well as possible even promises of the ANC. I think the latter will be less because, you know, the irony about this is that this is not going to be the real SONA. The real SONA is actually going to be after the election. In all election years, there are 2 SONA addresses. And I think that the second one will be the more realistic one, the one that will look towards the rest of the year, while this one will have a very strong, I would say, bias towards the election issues and the way in which the ANC or government anticipates how the election is going to unfold.
So I mean, there are certain things that he cannot avoid talking about. So I suppose he would need to talk about the energy situation, the electricity. Others are saying there is no turnaround because there are no funds. Others are saying, well, there has been, you know, this collaboration with the NECOM, which has produced a great deal of private sector investment into energy generation, which is looking good if you look ahead. Many households have put up solar systems on top of their roofs, so that in a sense is helping. However, load shedding has not gone away. Energy availability factor has not improved that much.
Yes, that is so. I think what we are seeing now, and that's maybe beyond what the SONA focus will be, although he's going to refer to it, is the collaboration that developed, and it's not really by design. It is something which has become a reality of political life, the cooperation between the private and the public sector. And more services or functions that's traditionally those of the state are now being performed by, or components of the private sector also. And I think this is why there is such unease within the ANC, that this is seen as an ideological shift which is taking place, and it is very much going against the grain of the traditional values of the ANC.
He's going to want to say, bring us back because we've done well. Look at what we've done around, for example, the SRD, Social Relief of Distress Grant, around the Presidential Youth Employment Initiative, around the Presidential Employment Stimulus. Some of the programs that I suppose are attributed to his administration that have certainly given some kind of assistance on the social side, but also on the youth employment side.
Yes, I think that the current government, although they are not the only one, previous ANC administrations started with it, claims very large success with respect to the SASSA grants or the social grants in general. And that's around about 19 million South Africans are receiving some other form of a grant. Now that's a massive project for any government. It's possibly one of the biggest in proportional terms in the world. But I think what it is doing is that it is a compensation for the fact that there's many people without work. So it becomes an alternative form of income. So it is a way of shielding many South Africans from dire poverty, but it does not really invest in them in order to have a long-term future that they can create for themselves in terms of a career, in terms of job, in terms of ensuring themselves and not be dependent on the public sector or on government. So in the long run, this is not sustainable. It's especially because the tax base that can support this is not big enough. And that means that there is not sufficient growth potential within the SASSA grant system. So I think the government will very soon, maybe is already at that point, where they will realize that they cannot extend it much further than where it is at the moment already. And that the real alternative is going to be how to restructure, change the economy in general, so that people can sustain themselves, can look after themselves from a financial, material point of view. And that the onus and the pressure on government should become less. Because, as I said, this is something which can last for a certain time, but it is now so pressurized, the fiscal situation, that it's impossible to extend it very much into the future.
It might not hold a lot of weight because this is not the real SONA, as you say, right up until elections, and he's sure whether or not he will be the next president. But he's already gotten marching orders from COSATU coming out of the Lekgotla. He might want to say something about public servants, certainly, and about public service.
Yes, that is a very important point. And again, one can even say from the time of President Mbeki, it has become a very important point. The civil service, the remuneration of the civil service, very important civil service strikes that were conducted in the late 1990s and thereafter against the government, the COSATU in effect against the government, the ANC government. And it's not only about employment of persons, it is about a much bigger philosophical or even ideological issue about what is the function, the responsibility of the state. The notion of a developmental state means that it must be a state with capacity. It means a state where there's civil servants who are not simply there because they fill positions, but they can actually have the capacity to provide very important services. It's over and above the SOEs. It is also the core services of the government that must be provided. And for that, it means that there must be sufficient funds available for that public sector to exist, to be remunerated for. So that pressure has been there for most of the time, the most of the 30 years that we have since 1994, of what should be the balance between the private sector and the public sector, and what are the responsibilities of the private sector. On the balance has always been ideologically or philosophically in favor of the public sector. But I think where we are at the moment, and it's purely a financial, fiscal matter, it has become very difficult for the ANC to sustain it. And we see it every year with the national budget speech by the Minister of Finance, where it raises this point and try to reduce the pressure on the fiscus from the point of view of the public remuneration.
Others are seeing that as non-alignment in terms of his government policy priorities and what his then ministers do, particularly Minister of Finance, Treasury, where he would probably want to announce the expansion of the SRD, but the minister could easily come out and contradict him and say, well, we just don't have money for that. It will end in March.
Yes, I think this is the predicament of most members of the government. is that there is this instinct almost on their side that they want to expand, that they want to become more involved with projects, with more involved through their departments, but there's limits to that. And from the Treasury side, there's very strict instructions that they must reduce their budgets. And I think this is a contradiction that actually exists in the minds of the members of government, is that they want to do more or spend more, have more money available, but the opposite is the political reality. And I think that is where a lot of pressure develops within government, is because they have now to prioritize, they have now to rationalize, and some of the projects and plans that they want to do is simply not possible. One good example of that, I would argue, is the National Health Insurance plan or policy, which is on paper might be very much possible, but from a fiscal point of view, it seems like it's almost impossible to implement at this point in time. So the government is therefore in a fix. It is that they can say that they have plans, but they don't have the money to implement it, and that is why they are unpopular in public.
The NHI, it's quite a fix for the president, is it not? Because he will want to say, well, my administration delivered NHI, but it's likely going to be caught up in court because of the private sector that is going to push hard against it, and they're saying, take it back to Parliament. It's not constitutional at this particular point. What does he do? Does he cite this as one of the milestones of his administration?
I think this is what they're going to do. What they will say is that we passed it through Parliament. He possibly will sign it because, as I understand it, he hasn't signed it yet. So they will claim that as complying with the mandate from the previous election, as well as from the ANC's National Conference of 2022. The implementation of that they will present as another phase, and that is where what you are mentioning is therefore can become the obstacles. But they will claim that they have in principle complied with the mandate that they've received from the ANC membership and from the public in general, and therefore that it's actually not they who are the obstacle to this. But I think if one goes into this issue in itself, it has been a policy of the ANC for, I would say, 15 years or longer. It has been already implemented with pilot projects in a number of districts, and the outcome of that some years back already has been not supportive of this project. So where we are now is, in a sense, a new phase of it in order to rescue the situation, over and above the financial resources that are available or not. And it is something which is a major uphill battle for the government or for the ANC in order to implement this. And it's possibly one of the over and above the electricity, I would say, one of the most difficult issues that the government will have to deal with.
Prof. Dirk Kotze, appreciate your time. Thank you very much for coming on.